Good morning. My in-laws are in town this weekend, and so I'm preaching again. And this has been literally every time they visited, which is just a crazy coincidence where Craig has some weird sixth sense when he makes the schedule. It's just kind of funny that it's happened this way. But I'm happy that they were come here this weekend to help us with Edwin and to hang out, and it's been really great to have them here. This morning, when I was coming up with this topic, I was kind of waffling between a few ideas. I had a kind of a topical idea that I want to talk about, but I also had this strange idea to do another Bible kind of character analysis because I really like doing that. And this weird impulse to try to also do a lesson on like a whole book of the Bible just to kind of like help go through that. And so I combined them all, and we're going to talk about Ruth because it is a book of the Bible. She is a person, as a woman of Moab. And the topical thing I want to talk about is one of the main lessons that I think we can take away from her account. So we're going to talk about all of those things this morning. So like I said, at first, we're going to talk about just a few key people in the account of Ruth that we kind of need to know as we kind of talk through it all. We're just going to do a brief, try to be brief overview of Ruth. It's only 4 chapters, so it's not too bad. Um, and just some lessons for us. And if you do like to follow along in your Bible this morning, I'll be pretty much exclusively out of Ruth for 90% of the lesson. So if you do want to follow along, open up to Ruth and you can follow us there. So some key people, if we look over in Ruth chapter 1 and verse 2, says the name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi, and the names of his two sons were Mahlon and Chilion, Ephrathites of Bethlehem and Judah. So they entered the land of Moab and remained there. So we see kind of our main family that came, the family of Israel. This is kind of, they're very important. And then we jump down to verse 4, chapter 1, and it says, and they took for themselves Moabite women as wives. The name of the one was Orpah, and the name of the other Ruth. And they lived there about 10 years. So we see that the Israelite family kind of headed over to Moab. The sons married these two Moabite women. And obviously, Ruth is our main girl here. So we'll kind of follow her mostly. And then also important over in Ruth chapter 2 and verse 1, now Naomi had a relative of her husband, a man of great wealth, of the family of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. Boaz is your other kind of important guy in this account to remember. And I just wanted to highlight this, a man of great wealth. That wasn't just that he was wealthy, he was also an important guy. He was kind of a righteous, kind of noble person here. There's the word, if you look behind the scenes in Greek, is like he's a good guy. He's a great guy if you kind of know the rest of the accounts. But just to kind of give a picture of who we got here. So in recap, we have Elimelech, who is the father of the Israelite family. We have Naomi, the mother of the Israelite family. Mahlon and Chilion, the sons of the Israelite family. Orpah and Ruth, the Moabite wives of the sons. And then Boaz, finally, the kinsman of Elimelech. So these are kind of our main people uh, as we kind of dive into just kind of keep them in mind. And we're going to kind of start right here over in Ruth 1, verse 1. It says, now it came about in the days when the judges governed that there was a famine in the land. And a man of Bethlehem in Judah went to reside in the land of Moab with his wife and his two sons. So now we kind of get an idea of when this was happening. This is the time of the judges. And if you know anything about the Old Testament, the judges was a very tumultuous time for the people in Israel. They kept following God for a little bit. They turn away. God would punish them. They'd be like, come save us. They send a judge. And we see this endless cycle going on. These are the days in which this is happening. But instead of the Israelite family kind of dealing with that, this famine, this bad thing happening, they kind of get out of town here. And so just to give a little picture of kind of what happened, they kind of did reverse of what Moses did for them. They left the promised land and kind of headed back towards wilderness area. And that's because once again there was a famine in the land there, so they couldn't really survive there. A lot of like scholars and commentary people have talked about how interesting it is that they kind of did like a reverse of all the things that they kind of worked up till now. They get in the promised land, they're like, no thanks, this isn't the land, and they kind of head back. And looking at it miles wise, you're like, that's not too far. But remember, no cars, and it was a pretty perilous journey for them to get over there. They did make it there, of course, but as we see in verses 3 and 5 of Ruth 1, it says, then Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left with her two sons. Then verse 5, then Mahlon and Chilion also died, and the woman was left without her two sons and her husband. Uh, Tragedy, horrible, terrible situation for Naomi. She came over there kind of full with this big family. She's like, we're gonna survive over here. We're gonna get away from the family. We're gonna build our way up here. It's going to be a great time. Then she loses all the men in her life here. And that's terrible because this makes her a widow and a childless widow at that. And back then, that was you're like the bottom of the barrel. You have nothing kind of going for you back then. And so she's obviously distraught. She's very upset. She doesn't know how to go on. She's like she does hear that things are going better back home. And so over in verse 6, then she arose with her daughters-in-law to return from the land of Moab because she had heard in the land of Moab that the Lord had visited her people by giving them food. So the famine's kind of been done here. And it's interesting because Bethlehem is kind of known as like the land of food and it didn't have food. Now it does. And they're like, okay, let's head on back. We're doing okay. So she grabs him and kind of heads over that way. But as she's going, she kind of realizes this is going to be bad for these Moabite women in Israel. Like they're foreigners, they'll be aliens to this area. It's not going to be good for them. So verses 8 and 9 says, But Naomi said to her two daughters-in-law, Go, return each of you to your mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and with me. May the Lord grant that you may find a place of rest, each one in the house of her husband. Then she kissed them, and they raised their voices and wept. So she realizes I can't just take them away from their land, their people, their family, everything that they've known just because it's only me now. She's like, you guys stay here, go back there. Maybe you can find another husband and kind of continue your life here. It'll be way easier for you. And this deal kindly is just like it's kind of like her way of giving them a little like blessing. The only blessing that she could actually give them. It's not strictly specifically a blessing, but it intones that kind of thing like go please. I wish nothing but the best for you guys. And it's we don't know exactly when they were married, how long they lived married. We there's a lot of details we don't exactly know, but they're obviously close because they're very close there. They started to cry. They were like, "We don't want to leave you." And both women after this were like, "No, we're gonna come with you." But Naomi's like, "No, for real, stay here. It'll be way better for you here. You don't want to be a foreigner in Israel and not have any children. Nothing good is going to be there for you." And Orpah was like, "Okay, I'll stay here. You're right." But Ruth like doubles down. So we see in verses 16 to 17, but Ruth said, Do not plead with me to leave you or to turn back from following you, for where you go, I will go, and where you sleep, I will sleep. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord do so to me, and worse, if anything but death separates me from you. Wow, that's quite the declaration of devotion here to her mother-in-law. And that's incredible. She's like, your God will be my God. Like I will follow you. This is it. I'm with you for the long haul. And that's gotta be tough. As much as I love my in-laws, I'm glad you guys are hearing this. Thanks for coming. It, it would be super hard for me to be like turn my back on my family and like and go with them. As great as you guys are, it's that's hard. Like I can't imagine what they were giving up for that. And once again, remember, she's not only going to be a widow of no children, but she's also going to be a foreigner. That's nothing. Like she is bottom of the barrel there. And she's willing to do that. And she makes this thing like death is the only thing that'll separate from like I will be with you. I got your back, Naomi. We're in this together. That's an awesome declaration of devotion and true understanding and compassion, really, because I mean she also lost her husband, right? But she's like Naomi lost her husband and children, and she's got nothing, and she's feeling really down. And back then, their names usually kind of meant how they were feeling or attributes of them. And Naomi means pleasant, but as she kind of makes her way back to Bethlehem, she's like, "Call me Mara from now on," and Mara means bitter. She's lost hope. She's like, "I got nothing. Like I went there full and I've come back empty. Ugh, I can't believe this happened." But Ruth is kind of the one shining light that she has that came back with her. So now we continue to Ruth chapter 2, verse 2. It says, And Ruth the Moabitess said to Naomi, Please let me go to the field and glean among the ears of grain, following one in whose eyes I may find favor. And she said to her, Go, my daughter. So they get back, and this gleaning among the ears of grain, they need food. And the only real way that like kind of they could come by stuff was kind of taking the scraps that were kind of left over after like the barley harvest was done. And so Ruth's like, hey, let me go there and try to get us some food, try to make a living. Maybe someone there will find favor with me and kind of we'll see what happens. And Naomi's like, okay, go ahead. My daughter, which is, she's like, she's come to rely on her in a big way. So she's like, go out there, do this. Let's make this happen. And so just to give a little picture of kind of what harvesting looks like, where this glean step kind of happens, right? They cut it with sickles, then they bind it all together, and then whatever kind of doesn't get bound together and kind of falls off, then the people can come in and kind of clean those up and pick them up. And then they thresh and winnow and sift and then bag it to go away. So kind of step three is when she can kind of come in. So you just get the scraps. And it's not all good stuff to eat either. She has to go through a process of making it actually consumable for them. So it's a lot of work. It's hard things that she has to do, but she's willing to do this to try to make them survive. To that's all she has. She's like, I'm gonna do the best that I can do. So now we jump down to verse 8, and it says, Then Boaz said to Ruth, Listen carefully, my daughter. Do not do not go to glean in another field. Furthermore, do not go on from this one, but join my young woman here. Keep your eyes on the field which they reap, and go after them. Indeed, I have ordered the servants not to touch you. When you are thirsty, go to the water jars and drink from what the servants draw. And so, as she's gleaning, she so happens to come across this field that's owned by Boaz. Boaz is Elimelech's kinsman, is a family member that's pretty decently close. Not the closest as we'll find out, but pretty decently close. And so he finds favor and is like, hey, don't go anywhere else, just stay in mine. And then the really, truly creepy, scary part, in my opinion, is like, hey, I've ordered my servants not to touch you. Wait a minute. She was taking a risk going to get this food for Naomi and herself. That was dangerous for her. Like, it's not that she could just kind of freely go out there and just like, oh yeah, just like pick up the scraps, just go home. Like, no big deal. No, like she was willing to go into a dangerous situation. And Boaz is like, do not worry. I'll protect you here. I'll keep you okay. Like, stay in my field, stay here and just don't go anywhere else. And so fortunately he's found favor with this person. We'll see the importance of the connection between Boaz and Elimelech as we kind of go on with our account here. So then verse 11 says, Boaz replied to her, All that you have done for your mother-in-law after the death of your husband has been fully reported to me, and how you left your father and your mother and the land of your birth and came to a people that you did not previously know. Because Ruth at this point is super confused. She's like, but why? Like, I understand I'm related to you, sort of. Like, why do you care so much about me? And he's like, I heard what you did. I heard what you did for your mother-in-law. It's like, and I don't think Ruth did that at that moment for this moment. Like, oh yeah, she was trying to be good so that later this Boaz guy wealthy man would come in and no, she was just being a good person. It's awesome to see that kind of like pay off. And that speaks to integrity, right? It's just like, that's when you do good, when you aren't expecting people to watch you or kind of like do anything because of that. Ruth exemplifies that hugely because she was willing to back Naomi and Boaz. Like, I heard about it. Awesome. And that's super cool of Boaz to be like, I appreciate what you did for them. Like, I'm going to try to take care of you. And he acknowledges how hard it was because she left everything. Once again, her family, land, everything that she knew, she just kind of put it behind to help Naomi out because Naomi was down cataclysmically bad and she needed somebody. And Ruth stepped up in once again that huge way. So we jump down to verses 15 and 16. It says, When she got up to glean, Boaz commanded his servants, saying, Let her glean even among the sheaves, and do not insult her. And also you are to purposely slip out for her some grain from the bundles and leave it so that she may glean and do not rebuke her. And so that's why I went over the steps before. She's now kind of been elevated to step two in our harvesting step. If you remember, she can now go among the sheaves and kind of grab some stuff there because the amount that she comes back with here was like an epoch or something. Basically, a very large amount that you wouldn't expect to get from the scraps that were kind of left over. And when Naomi sees that, she's like, "How'd you get so much stuff?" Boaz. Boaz here acknowledges the goodness. And he's like, "Hey guys, like leave some extra there. Like make sure Naomi get." And like Naomi and Ruth gets this stuff, and like don't rebuke her. Don't be don't be mean. To just let her have it. He's trying to help her out, which is awesome to see. But once again, Ruth is taking the big steps here to try to make this happen, and she's found favor now with Boaz, which is going to help immensely as we kind of continue along this way. In verse 20, it says, Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, May he be blessed of the Lord, who has not withdrawn his kindness from the living and from the dead. Again, Naomi said to her, "The man is our relative. He is one of our redeemers." And so this concept of redeemer in Old Testament is it's a little interesting. So basically, it's to try to continue the lineage of the person that has passed away. And so if someone has like a brother and the first person dies, the brother is supposed to have a child with the widow so that the brother's name can kind of keep going on. Um, Ruth's husband's brother also died, so now it's like you kind of keep stretching out to different relatives, different kin. Boaz is one of them. He is one of these redeemers, and they call them redeemers so that the family line kind of continue. Any sort of lands and privileges and rights that family had wouldn't just die away and be gone. Um, and so it's just a little a little Christ-like, if you allow the analogy, because Christ our Redeemer, Boaz is the Redeemer in this situation. He comes in and kind of helps them because once again they have nothing. So he's willing to come in there. And also this means that he's kind of put himself into a slightly precarious situation because if the if he does decide to be the redeemer of Ruth and the child that he has and that's his only male heir, then all of his rights and lands will instead go to her dead husband's rights and like he'll lose kind of what he has, but he's still like, I'm going to do the right thing by Ruth. Ruth is a woman of character here. I'm going to follow her and help her out. We jump over now to Ruth chapter 3 verses 9 to 11, and there it says, so he said, "Who are you?" And she answered, "I am Ruth, your slave. Now spread your garment over your slave, for you are a redeemer." Jumping down to verse 11, it says, "So now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you whatever you say, for all my people in the city know that you are a woman of excellence." So I skipped over a lot of things that happened before here, so I'll fill you in before this. But basically, Naomi tells Ruth, "Hey, you've spent this whole season kind of like gleaning from Boaz's field here. Um, not dating per se, but he's like they've gotten to know each other in like a group setting. Like he obviously knows that she's a woman of excellence. Like he appreciates and has been helping her this whole time. And Naomi's like, hey, like dress yourself up here, clean yourself up, and then go and meet him because during the harvest time it's kind of like a time of celebration because they're getting their food, things are going well. And what happens is like the landowner kind of sleeps near where all his sheaves are, not where all things are, so that no one comes and steals it. And so back then, you could kind of women weren't normally down there, but Naomi's like, Ruth, go to him there and then say, like, hey, you're one of our redeemers. Would you like to redeem, please? Basically, will you marry me? That was like Ruth comes in and is like, hey, you've been really good to us. What do you think? Can you marry? She basically proposes to him in a slightly strange way. So the people are partying. Um, Boaz is asleep there. She shows up and then uncovers his feet and then sleeps at his feet. And then he wakes up is like, who are you? And then we come in here and she's like, oh yes, please, would you be willing to do this? And then he obviously accepts that because he recognizes her as a woman of excellence. Um, you can This is the customs of the day. I know it feels weird, but this is how it was done. And fortunately, once again, Boaz acknowledged and saw the goodness that Ruth had and was doing. And so it was really nice of him. But verses 12 and 13. But now, although it is true that I am a redeemer, yet there is also a redeemer more closely related than I. Remain this night, and when morning comes, if he will redeem you, good, let him redeem you. But if he does not wish to redeem you, then I will redeem you. As the Lord lives, lie down until morning. And so the law is kind of getting in the way here. There's a kin, a relative that is closer to them. And it's like he has first claim technically. If he does not want to do that, I got your back. I got you. I understand. I appreciate you. And that's very forward thinking of Boaz because this is a foreigner, the law is not super thrilled with people marrying outside of Israel, but since he saw the goodness that Ruth was doing and the woman of excellence, he saw all of that. He's like, okay, you're somebody that I can trust. You're somebody that is a good. I got you. Don't worry. So let me jump over to chapter 4 and verse 3, and it says, and he said to the Redeemer, Naomi, who has returned from the land of Moab, has to sell the plot of land which belonged to our brother Elimelech. And so this is part of that law that I was talking about. It's like whenever they have land or something, the kinsman is supposed to kind of claim it so that it can remain within the family at large. And he's like, you have the first claim to this land. And the guy's like, awesome, I want the land. Sign me up for that. Um, and then uh, after after he kind of shows that and says like, okay, I want the land. Boaz is like, oh, also, side notes, when you do kind of take that land, one of the daughters-in-law is here too. You'll have to wed her and produce an heir so that the family lineage can continue. And the guy's like, ooh, um, that puts me in a weird spot because he didn't have an heir currently. And like I was talking about before, that means that his lands, his rights, his wealth is at jeopardy because if he only has a child with Ruth, that's it. All of his stuff goes instead to Elimelech's family, and I'm not entirely sure which son, but one of the sons, like that lineage would then kind of continue there. And so he was like, a hard pass on that one. Sorry, I'm gonna defer. Sorry. And then we come to verse 7 and 8 here, and it says, and now this was the custom in former times in Israel concerning the redemption and the exchange of land to confirm any matter. A man removed his sandal and gave it to another, and this was the way of confirmation in Israel. So the Redeemer, and this is the closer kin, said to Boaz, buy it for yourself, and he removed his sandal. This doesn't have a ton to do with Ruth. I just thought it was a very interesting point about how they confirmed things. It was very interesting that that was kind of the way that they did it. I don't know. Maybe we do a handshake today. I don't know, but I guess they did this back then. But I just wanted to point out that there was some formality to this, and he also, as he's talking to this man, he grabbed like 10 elders from the area, so he had witnesses. It's like he wanted to make sure there's like I'm not stepping over lines, because come later that guy could have been like, I wanted that land, you didn't come to me. No, no, he Boaz did it the right way. And was like, come to me, watch this. You're all witnesses. We did this. This is all above board. Uh, so then in verse 10 it says, furthermore, I have acquired Ruth the Moabitess, the widow of Mahlon, to be my wife, in order to raise up the name of the deceased on his inheritance, so that the name of the deceased will not be eliminated from his brothers or from the court of his birthplace. You are witnesses today. She was married to Mahlon. I totally forgot which one, but here's so um, he's once again just decided to further the line. So Naomi's line is also getting now. So Naomi's kind of a little happy too that she didn't kill off the family line or anything. Like that gets to continue. So then verses 14 and 15 it says, then the woman said to Naomi, blessed is the Lord who has not left you without a redeemer today, and may his name become famous in Israel. May he also be to you one who restores life and sustains your old age. For your daughter-in-law who loves you is better to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him. And so this is after they've had a child together, and like the women are like, Naomi, it's awesome that you have Ruth in your life. She's better than 7 sons, which is a crazy awesome thing to say about Ruth back then because first off, seven's the number kind of perfect things and complete things, and sons back then are far better than daughters. Sorry, that's just how it was. It's just like they were the ones that continued the line, they were the ones that continued the family. All the things kind of passed through the sons, and so for people to say this and acknowledge this, this elevates Ruth to incredible heights, and that's part of the reason I wanted to talk about Ruth because she's so awesome in this respect in just all respects. But finally, over in verse 17, it says, and the neighbor woman gave him a name, saying, a son has been born to Naomi. So they named him Obed. He is the father of Jesse, the father of David, the king. And if you go on further, this means that she's in the lineage of Christ, and she's one of 4 people mentioned in the book of Matthew, chapter 1, which is just awesome to see that this foreigner is kind of listed as part of those things. If you look at the other women there too, they're also very interesting that they're listed there too. But Ruth absolutely deserves to be mentioned in that lineage, in my opinion, because of all the wonderful and awesome things that she did. Okay, so quick recap of our overview of Ruth here. So there's a famine in Israel, and Naomi and the family came to Moab. The men didn't make it, but Ruth sticks around by Naomi as they make their way back to Bethlehem. And they head to Bethlehem and meet up with Boaz, who's a very great person. And Boaz feeds them and becomes their redeemer. And then he bypasses the closer relative, and gets past them. And then Ruth and Boaz get married and have a son, Obed, who then becomes part of Christ's line. So finally, some lessons for us. The big one and the main topic that I want to talk about was empathy and compassion. If you look over in Romans chapter 12, verse 15, and then Hebrews chapter 13 and verse 3, it says, rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. And then Hebrews, uh, remember the prisoners as though in prison with them, and those who are badly treated, since you yourselves also are in the body. And empathy and compassion have really been on my mind recently, especially just in my personal life, because people have been so generous and kind to us as we're endeavoring along this new path of parenthood, and everyone's just been so empathetic to us because they're like, I get it, I was there, I understand. How can we help you? And that's been tremendously incredible. And in our Christian lives, we need to do exactly the same thing because even though we have things maybe figured out or some things figured out, remember that you didn't always have that. Remember all those things where you messed up and stumbled in the past. We need to be willing to look at people and kind of meet them where they're at and just understand that. There's so many other verses I could talk about here. We're supposed to bear one another's burdens. We're supposed to lift each other up, encourage them to restore them back, meet them where they're at. Remember what it was like to be on the outs because we were. The only thing that is different between us and here and the rest of the world is that we are redeemed sinners. Like that's it. We've all messed up. We all screwed up. Remember that when we kind of meet with people. Have that empathy, have that compassion for everybody. Another lesson is devotion and loyalty. As we look over in 1 Corinthians chapter 15 and verse 58, it says, therefore, my beloved brothers and sisters, be firm, immovable, always excelling in the work of the Lord, knowing that your labor is not in vain in the Lord. Always back them up. And that's once again one of the huge lessons we learned from Ruth, where she stuck by Naomi, even though it wasn't the fiscally responsible thing to do, even though it wasn't the most human logical choice that she could have made in that moment, she stuck by her. And in our Christian lives, we need to do exactly the same thing with God and Jesus. We need to make sure that we're always back in the play. We'll always have that same level of devotion to them, that hopefully nothing would separate them from us other than death, just like that claim that Ruth made to Naomi. We need to have that same devotion to God. And then finally, one of redemption and hope. If we look over in Galatians chapter 3 and verse 28, it says, there's neither Jew nor Greek, there's neither slave nor free, there's neither male nor female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus. And that gives us this hope that it doesn't matter what you've done in your past. It doesn't matter how many times you've messed up. It matters what you're doing now and going forward. And sometimes I think we can get tripped up on past mistakes or past lives, or we may think like God doesn't want me. I'm too bad. You don't know what I've done. I can't even step foot in that church. I just burst into flame. It doesn't matter. God is willing to redeem everyone. He wants you. He wants you there. He wants us there. And he wants everybody else here too. And so if you run into somebody that's kind of feeling that way, encourage them, be like, that's not the case. That is not the God that we follow. And Boaz kind of offered that kind of same security to Ruth. That's how we kind of get the redemption point here too. So finally, just a little recap once again: empathy and compassion, devotion and loyalty, and redemption and hope. There's so many other things that I could have talked about. I know these are super broad and generic, but there's so much in Ruth that I'm running out of time, obviously. But there's so many things I wanted to talk about. But the one that I was once again most personally attached to right now is this empathy and compassion I've felt in a big new way, and I've really appreciated. And I'm trying to add that to my Christian life and add that in bigger ways into every aspect of my life. So finally, in conclusion, the book of Ruth is a great message, but in a small package. You could read it this afternoon if you wanted. I promise it wouldn't take too long. If you want to fill in kind of the gaps, we read a lot of them, I promise, but there's some points I didn't talk about. Ruth's loyalty and devotion to Naomi is inspiring. Her empathy and compassion is basically unmatched. And her and Naomi's redemption should give us hope. And we need a redeemer too. And Ruth had Boaz, but we have Christ. We have this perfect person that came down here that even though we were sinners, even though we were the adversary of God, he was willing to die for us. He was willing to offer himself up freely for us. And I think sometimes, I know we talk about it every Sunday when we take the Lord's Supper, but I just want us to really hone in on that feeling, really appreciate it because sometimes it's easy to overlook, be like, yeah, I know, I know, I know. No, no. Appreciate what happened. God, Christ, decided to give up that eternal sitting for a second and come down here. He clothed himself in humanity. First off, once again, I think I've mentioned this before. If I'm up there, sorry, friends, I'm staying in that eternal place. I'm staying in that spot. Christ decided to come down and help us out in the biggest way possible, because without him we have no hope. So if you are struggling in your life or if you've stumbled along your way and you want to be redeemed, we'd love to help you with that. If you want to just talk about something going on in your life, you can come up here. You can grab me, grab anybody. But if you want to be added to the church, we'd love to help assist you with that too. If you have any needs, please come forward to stand and sing the invitation song.